All right. All right, shalom, everyone. See, this is who's got the stamina or isn't still stuck in a restaurant. Or a little of both. All right, fantastic. So, tonight we want to just go ahead and have our last open Midrash. We're still going to have a discussion after tomorrow's readings, our last readings. Just want to go over the schedule again for everyone, but I'll wait a minute here as we got a few more trickling in. Just a reminder about tomorrow. So tomorrow we have our last scripture reading in the morning, followed by lunch. We are doing our last tours of the property. If anybody, I guess mostly everybody probably saw it today when we went to take the picture, so that went well. And then we have our Holy Day prep, so that gives you guys time to be doing whatever you need to do to get ready for the weekend, for Shabbat and for the Holy Day. All right, and then we have our Erev Shabbat and Holy Day dinner, and we'll be doing that for those who paid for it in the main building. And I know it says praise time on the schedule. We may or may not, depending on the weather, be able to come out here and do some of that because we are expecting it as we get into the weekend to be bringing some rain. So we're just not sure when that will happen. Okay? And those of you that are scheduled for counseling, just go ahead and try and be on time for those sessions. Those are done in the conference room that's right there next to the main dining. As well as if you did not get to get on the schedule, but you have something that's reasonably quick, then you can just, if you have nothing else to do, you can come sit tomorrow afternoon during the time I have scheduled, and if somebody happens to be quick and I have extra time, I can try to sneak you in there, and that can work as well. Because sometimes people need more than the 20 minutes I give them, and sometimes they're very quick. So we can see how that can work out. Okay? And if we do not get to have a time for you, just let us know. We can try to schedule it either by phone or sometime in the future. All right, so that ought to cover it for that. Now, so you guys enjoying yourself so far? It's hard to believe it's almost over. It just feels like it just got started. You know? No. Because tomorrow's the last day of Sukkot. And then we have Shemini Atzeret. Yay! It's almost like it feels like that's why they created Shemini Atzeret. That you get to the end of Sukkot going, can we just stay one more day, please? So we have the 8th day assembly. Fantastic, awesome. All right, so tonight we're going to be doing somewhat of an open discussion. You can ask questions about just about anything, and I will choose whether or not to answer them. So if anybody would like to go first, just go ahead and raise your hand. We got microphones available to come around the room. Got a whole bunch of hands going up. We'll begin with Michelle on the live stream desk. I've got Kurt.
All right, Rabbi, from our readings, I didn't get to ask a few questions I had, but I was going to wait.
Okay.
All right, in 25, the last three, I think it's 17 through 19, about Amalek, and it tells us not to forget. Is that still for us today? I mean, is that something that we need to remember also?
All right, so in verse 17, remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you were coming out of Mitzrayim. Okay, so, I mean, we should understand that there's a certain relationship that he wants to have, his people have with Amalek, and that being none. Okay? And so, yes, we should be aware of that. The problem is, at this point, we would have no idea who was an Amalekite. Right? It was a lot easier back then. Nations were pretty much in certain parts of the territorially, they were in different parts of the world there, and it was nearby to where Israel was, and you knew where the Amalekites were, or you knew where the other different tribes were or other nations were around you. So if you worried about the Hittites, you knew where they were. The Amalekites, you knew where they were, okay? All those ites, okay? And so today, I guess there needs to be some sort of an awareness that there's a relationship if we understood that. But that's really still in the scripture here for the cohesive nation in the land as a people. All right? Okay, so there would be no requirement for you to act upon anything out here.
Okay.
Okay?
The other thing I wanted to make sure I'm connecting this right was in 28. 64 to the end of the chapter, where it says, and Yahweh shall scatter you among all peoples. That's what we're in now, right?
Correct.
That's for us now.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. That's what I needed to know.
Okay, so we are in the dispersion, we're in the scattering, we're in the punishment section of the Deuteronomy 28 prophetic word that Yahweh gave us of what would happen. All right, so we're experiencing that now. By the way, there are things that happen in your life that help you understand that there are absolutely no doubt, there should be no doubt that your word, that the scripture that you have available to you to read is accurate. Okay? And so one of those is like when we talk about how you have to have eyes to see and ears to hear. Now, we're not talking about being at a time when there was almost 0% literacy. We're at a time when most people understand, they can read, they can write, they've been educated on some level, they seem to be fairly intelligent, and yet you have a conversation with them and they can't understand a word you're talking about. That's only possible when something as simple as what you show them, or as simple as what you were shown and you couldn't see before you could see it. That's only possible if what he's saying is true. Okay, because a lot of people say, well, how do I know the Bible's true? Because that right there is proof. It doesn't matter how simple it is, and you show it to them in black and white, even if you do it in their own copy of the Bible. Say, please, take out your Bible, let me see. Let's turn to this verse and let's read it. It doesn't matter. They can't. Not won't, but they can't see it. And that's because it has to do with there needs to be a divine revelation. He has to open up your ears, eyes, mind, heart, etc. to receive. So just keep that in mind, okay? And that's part of the thing that Michelle was asking about. In the scattering, in the scattered place, access is restricted. He chooses who and when. Okay, access is restricted. Some of you say, well, that doesn't sound fair. Well, it's not your choice. It's his choice. And I promise you, it's fair. Once we understand the full picture, it's fair. With the limited understanding, it may seem unfair. I mean, a lot of things that we read about, if you only understood up to the point you're reading and didn't know what happened next, it may seem unfair. Then later on, you see what it plays out, and you go, oh, that actually made sense now. But we have it all played out here, so we get to read the whole thing. Like, boy, that seemed really unfair to pull them out of Egypt after all those miracles, to stick them at the sea and have them surrounded by Egyptians ready to kill them. That didn't seem like a brilliant move. I'm just saying, if you were reading that story up to that point and you didn't know, problem is you can't remember a time when you actually didn't know. So you can't even remember what it was like to read that, not knowing. Okay? But you would have maybe thought, if you only got that far in the story, why would he do that? Back them up between a rock and a hard place, literally? Because we don't know the whole story. And he says, even with the scattering in Deuteronomy 28, there would also be a regathering, which he tells us in many places. Okay, Ezekiel 37 and lots of other places where he talks about the two sticks coming back together, Jeremiah 31, where he talks about the renewing of the covenant, all kinds of places where the regathering is discussed. In Hosea and other places. Every prophet pretty much talks about it, including Moses, who says, and while you're in the place where you're scattered, and then your heart turns to Yahweh, and you seek him with all your heart, he's going to return you back at some point. Okay, so we get the whole story that way. All right, who's next? Okay? I can't see.
I come out here.
All right, TL, I got you.
Good evening, Rabbi. In Deuteronomy chapter 23, in verse 3, it says, an Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter the assembly of Yahweh. Now you go down to verse 7, it says, do not loathe the Edomite, for he is your brother, and do not loathe a Mitzrayim, because you are a stranger in his land. Why in verse 7, they're saying, do not loathe the Edomite and the Mitzrayim?
As opposed to what he said about the Ammonite and the Moabite?
Yes.
All right. They're all different peoples, and he has reasons for each one. So he tells us really why, as far as the the Edomite, he's your brother, right? Because Edom was Esau. And he tells us why the Mitzrayite, because you were strangers in his land. He doesn't tell us why with the Ammonite and the Moabite, not here. There's other places that discuss it. So what's the deal with the Ammonites and the Moabites? Okay, where do they come from? From Lot's daughters' incestuous behavior. He says, that doesn't go into my place. All right? So it has to do with the reasoning. Okay, he has a totally different reason for why we deal with this one group this way and this other group this other way. All right? It's a good question. By the way, it also is one of those things where I didn't mention it this morning, but when you look at it, it says, even a 10th generation of them does not enter. If you do the math, it is less than 10 generations to Ruth. So it's not like someone could say, well, Ruth must have been more than 10 generations. She wasn't more than 10 generations from this moment. Okay? And so that's, again, where we prove that it's about citizenship and not by what you're born. Okay? Excellent. All right, who's next? Live stream. Thank you for the rotation. And we have, again, a microphone that is not working. What did you do to that mic again? Did you break it again?
Somebody took the batteries out.
Oh, it works better with them.
That's what I heard.
Yeah. Actually, I didn't hear because the batteries weren't in it.
Okay, chapter 28. There's some leftovers from this morning. Says,
I do like leftovers.
They're the best.
Everybody likes leftovers.
From Daughter of Zion, says, Rabbi, can you explain Deuteronomy 28, the curses? I have heard that this can only fit the African Americans because of the slaves and the ships.
All right. This gets back to those just fun-loving people called the Black Hebrew Israelites. Okay? We got to just knock off this whole, we got racism, we got what we call reverse racism, and everybody else is going to, this is not ever about the color of your skin, nor is it about one particular race. They were a mixed multitude coming out of Egypt and starting before Deuteronomy 28. The people being talked about in Deuteronomy 28 were a mixed multitude. Okay? And those that assimilated then in and became officially all of them Israel. Now, as far as trying to figure out who's who and what's what, oh man, so many people have tried to do that over the years. It's like the people trying to figure out the calendar. Well, I got to try to figure out the one people that I think matches this thing throughout history. Really? So, does it match all black people in all places they ever lived and all those things? Of course not. It doesn't match any one people that you can point to and say, just them all things, because they were scattered. And once they were scattered, these things happened to them wherever they were, intermixed with whoever they intermixed with. And so what we have to be careful of is what's motivating this is a racism. Okay, and by the way, blacks can be racist just as much as whites, or yellows, or greens, or anybody else. Anybody that's making color the primary concern is being racist. All right? Anybody. Whatever the color is, if you're seeing color, that's the problem. And so there are white supremacists that want to make it about that it's only talking about white people, it's a white people thing, and they can read the scriptures and try and interpret it as all white. And then you got the Black Hebrew Israelites who want to make it all about black. And they will say that only black people are the 12 tribes and tell you what nations are from and all this other nonsense. We got to get past that. Okay, we have got to get past seeing color. All right? This is just never going to make it. Oh, it's easy for you to say, Rabbi, you're white, blah, blah, blah. You know what? We just got to stop that. It's not my fault. I didn't choose my color. And you didn't choose yours. And if you've watched me long enough, I don't treat you any different if you're short or tall, fat or skinny, black or white, yellow or green, old or young or anything. Because that's correct. But you need to know that there's ugliness that's, we'll call the ugliness colorblind. All colors seem to find a way to get ugly. All right? There's no respecter of colors in ugliness. If you're black, you can be real ugly. If you're white, you can be real ugly. If you're yellow, you can be real ugly. Okay, go to some of the Asian nations and see some ugliness going on between yellow and yellow. Okay? Go to some places and see brown on brown, white on white, whatever on whatever. It's killing humanity. And this is Hasatan's favorite tool, to race bait. You see it in this country right now. I don't know how I can come across or come against it more strongly. Don't buy into it. When you start to group all, and then you put a color, and then something negative, or all and a color, and then something positive, you've messed up. Stop trying to block everything together and group everything together of one race. We do this even like, forget about races, we do this even like with positions. All police are blah, 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 blah. No, they're not. There are some good ones and some bad ones. All black people, there are some good ones and some bad ones. All white people, there are some good ones and some bad ones. All anything you can name, there are some good ones and some bad ones. Can we not agree? So we gotta show the world that we can be above all that nonsense. Okay? And in the religious wise, well, all Christians or all Jews or all Messianics or all, there is no cohesively homogeneous group that's all one way. We're all mixed. There's all a mix, whether it's skin color, whether it's status of wealth, whether it's in, understanding and knowledge, whether it's whatever. Everything's mixed. Skin color, education level, it doesn't matter. We're all a mixed group. And I don't think we should ever use those ridiculous measuring sticks for anything. Amen? All right, enough of that. You know, it's really sad because occasionally I get a thought and I get all upset myself because I have the thought. I get a frustrated thought when I look out and see that there's way more of one color or another in a particular church group or an art group, whatever, because I know others will judge it. Not because I'm judging it. It's like I'm really glad that Abba's blessing us with much more of a mix so that the world can see a mix and not just see white and think this is somehow a white thing. It's a Torah thing. It's an Israel thing. Okay? That's why I love it when we go to wave goodbye and everybody can see, oh, wow, look, there's a lot of people of everything in there. It shouldn't have to be. It shouldn't matter. If we happen to be in a country that was mostly whatever color, then you'd expect most of the people to be that color. All right? And if you're in a different country that's mostly a different color, you'd expect most of the people to match the population. But why we care, I just don't understand. I never did. I was very blessed. I was raised in I was blessed and cursed. I was raised in a very liberal home, which politically, not so great. Very frustrating and all that. But my family, we lived on a very United Nations type block. I mean, every different nation and color and everything was on our block that I lived on. And I just never was taught to see any of that, except people with different, really cool and interesting cultural stuff, especially when we had our block parties and we got to bring food out and got to try all the cool food. Because they bring stuff from wherever because my one neighbor on one side was Korean, my next door neighbor on the other side was Haitian, I got another neighbor across the street was Italian, and another across the street was Indian, from India, Indian, right? And we had and everything you can imagine from all over the place. And so I was very blessed. I was never taught to see that, which I guess helps make me qualified for this in some level, okay? Because I think that this would be awful if the person standing up here saw color. Okay? And I don't, I promise you. I don't see gender. I don't see age. I don't see physical health condition. I don't see anything but people. And that's enough of a problem. Because whatever those other things are, I notice that people are still people. All right? Whether they are any of those other things, somehow there's good ones and there's bad ones. There's sane ones and there's crazy ones. And there's everything in between. All right? All right, so now that I gave that little mini sermon, who's next? Still with Rob? Okay, live stream.
Okay, from Carrie Ann Worthy, says Deuteronomy 28:56. Rabbi, could you please expound on this for me?
Okay, let's see. 56. The tender and delicate woman among you who have not tried to set her sole of her foot on the ground because of her delicateness and tenderness, her eye is evil against the husband of her bosom, and against her son, and against her daughter, and against her seed which comes out from between her feet, and her children whom she bears, for she eats them in secret, for lack of all, in the siege and distress with which your enemy distresses you in all your gates. All right? Let's go back a little bit. All right, so it talks about, go back to, we can go back really far here. Okay, verse 47 says, because you did not, by the way, this is the best way to answer questions when you can, is take the verse, go back and figure out the context, or if I'm teaching it to you, let me show you how the scripture interprets itself. All right? Verse 47, because you didn't serve Yahweh, your Elohim with joy and gladness of heart for all the plenty, you're going to serve your enemies. Okay, so that's the first thing. You're going to serve your enemies, and in thirst and in nakedness and all need, he shall put a yoke of iron on your neck until he has destroyed you. Okay, so Yahweh's going to bring nations against you from afar, and they're going to, verse 50, a fierce-looking nation which shows no regard for the elderly, nor show favor to the young. They shall eat the fruit of your livestock and the fruit of your land until you are destroyed. They leave you no gain, nor new wine, nor oil, nor increase of your cattle, or the offspring of your flocks until they are destroyed. And they shall besiege you at your gates till your high and fenced walls, in which you are trusting, come down in all your land. And they shall besiege you at your gates in all your land, which Yahweh your Elohim has given you. And you shall eat the fruit of your own body, the flesh of your sons and your daughters, whom Yahweh your Elohim has given you, in the siege and distress in which your enemies distress you. So he's now making a literal, because literally that might have happened, but also a metaphor saying, you are going to kill each other, blame each other, you're going to turn on each other. Even families, you're going to turn on the flesh of your body. So they're going to start turning on each other. This happens in sieges. He says, and the man among you who is tender and who is very delicate, his eye is evil against his brother, against his wife of his bosom, and against the rest of his children whom he leaves behind, against giving any of them the flesh of the children that he eats, because it is all that has been left to him in the siege and distress in which the enemy distresses you in your gates, and the tender, delicate woman. So remember, he's talking about both the man and the woman. He's calling them tender and delicate. Okay? Let's translate that from an idiomatic phrase into these two are extremely weak. What's more weak than this selfish behavior that they're describing here? Selfishness is an extreme weakness. It takes strength to put others above yourself. It takes strength to put others first. It takes strength to make those kind of decisions. So they're talking about here, they're idiomatic phrase for someone who is weak, who is selfish, who is just not even understanding what's going on. It's just all about me and my survival, to whatever with all the rest of you. This is tender and delicate. Okay? And it says, look, when it says, who has not even tried to set the sole of her foot on the ground because of her death. In other words, she's not even willing to do anything. Same thing with the guy. He's not willing to try, do anything, do what's necessary under the siege, do what's necessary to protect his family. All he cares about, or all she cares about, is herself. Do we see that? Okay? Amen. Next question.
So, kind of going back, from Jasmine McAllister, when you were talking about the roles of the husband or wife, or the rights of the husband or wife, or whatever, it says, what are the rights of a wife?
You have the right to remain silent. I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? Oh, I'm just too red yellow. I'm just too sarcastic. Okay, look. This is a foolish thought path. Okay? And forget about the right to remain silent. That plays into all the church stuff that said women need to just shut up and all that stuff, which Paul never said, by the way. Ladies, you need to speak up when you need to speak up. And men, you need to trust and take that good counsel you get from your wives and take it seriously. That doesn't mean you obey them, but you need to take under full consideration all the things they tell you. Because they're your wife. They should be your primary voice that you can listen to and get insight about something you might not be seeing. Abba gave them to you to see things that maybe you don't see. That doesn't mean, ladies, that every time you see it, that he doesn't see it. You're right. It doesn't mean you're wrong either. It just means that you may see something. And the men should take that under strong consideration. Now, the problem with the thought process is, well, what are the rights of the women? What are the rights of the men? And you start asking for the rights, and then you start to block in and limit everything. Let's not look for that list of, and then if I don't put it on the list, then one uses that as a weapon against the other. Okay, that's not going to help anything. You are first to try to figure out how to become echad, one. You're to try to figure out how to walk together by coming into an agreement on how to walk. These are the things I talked about the other night, and these are the things that I do in marriage counseling, is to counsel people to discuss before getting married. Of course, we have to do a whole different thing if you're already married. Then you already have the problems because you didn't do this before, but to figure out whether or not you can be in agreement about how you're going to walk together. I'm not just talking about Torah, I'm talking about life. Okay? I know somebody that got married, and she naturally thought, she came from a big family, that she's going to have like 8, 9 kids or whatever. Come to find out, he didn't want any. They had never had that part of the conversation. Now, most people do, but somehow they just both assumed, and nobody said anything. That's a pretty harsh thing to find out after saying I do. Might have wanted to find it out before. Find out if it's negotiable. All right, you want 8. I really didn't want any, but I could be okay with 3. Maybe that is good enough for the person who wanted 8. I don't know. You talk about these things. So it's not about rights, okay? Yahweh's not a respecter of persons. All of this needs to be done without partiality for all. There are expectations for the men and expectations of the women based on role, not on rights. Okay, so let's be really careful with that. Okay? A woman is not a man, and a man is not a woman. Neither, though, is greater than the other in value. Neither is esteemed higher in Yahweh's eyes. There's just a hierarchy of responsibility. Okay? It's very simple. Yeah, you can clap for that. All right? I was just talking to Melissa. She could clap. She was kind of just doing this. Okay. Hopefully you understand this. Churches, societies through the centuries have tried to make women be less. You're not less. In some ways, you're more. But that's not, whether it's less or more is not the point. It's about, are you being a woman? Are you the man? Are you being a man? And then if you get married, are you learning to become a wife? Are you learning to become a husband? And then if you have children, are you learning to become a father and a mother? Because you are not by default any of those things. You have to learn how to do them. You have to learn how to be a woman. You could be born one, but you don't know how to be one. You have to learn how to be a man. You're born one, but you don't know how to be one. And you read your scriptures, you see people doing a really pretty bad job of it. More often than you see some good jobs of it. And so you have to understand that when you come together in marriage, you have a man and a woman coming together. Well, guess what? That doesn't automatically make them, see, this is almost like I said, I should take this out of the part of the wedding ceremony where you say, I now pronounce you husband and wife. I should say, I now insist that you learn to become a husband and a wife. You now must begin to learn. I should change the wedding ceremony to say that. You're laughing. I'm not kidding. Because how can I pronounce them something they haven't the slightest idea what that is? I now pronounce you obligated to figure out how to become a husband and wife. You're legally married, but that doesn't make you a husband and wife. It makes you a man and a woman who are married. I'm telling you, I counsel all day long with people, not here necessarily, but day after day, year after year, marriages that are struggling, and that's why they're struggling. You got a man and a woman who don't understand how to be the development that comes from their personality that has to be shifted in the role of husband and wife from man and woman. The way I should say the personality, their perspective, the approach, the way of seeing life has to shift. I saw life as a man. Well, that requires me to do all kinds of things. Go out and conquer and find a woman and get married. Well, now I'm married. Now I got to shift things a little bit. I got to provide for her, not just me. I don't just go out and conquer. I've got to do things so it's for her. I got to keep her safe, not just I'm out there looking to take care of business. I'm a man. Well, wait, I can't just do some of those things if it puts her in jeopardy. See, now I got to think differently because it now may affect her. Same thing with the woman. I'm a woman. Now, I can't go into all the details. I can't speak like that because I'm not a woman. But whatever that is, which we'll have classes on at some point to really get into, okay, has to then be shifted from what that is into wife. And by the way, maybe you figure out husband and wife and then you have children. Now you're still in a quandary. Because just because you figured out how to be husband and wife, now you got to figure out how to be a mom and a dad. And that's not automatic. And there is no training for that generally. I mean, I've often joked about how I turned to my wife. You ask her, this conversation happened. My son was born. We proved we could put the car seat in. Wow, that's the big criteria to taking home a baby. Any idea how to be a father? Nope. Can you put the car seat in? Yep, he's yours. Okay. And I looked at her, I said, in the car, we were sitting in the park, and she looked at me like, why aren't you driving? I said, they're out of their minds. She goes, what do you mean? I said, they're letting us take him. I said, we don't know what we're doing. Yeah. You ask her, this is a real conversation. You can't make this stuff up. Anybody think that way when you had your first kid? Okay. Well, I said it to her leaving the hospital. I was like, now what do we do? You know, I mean, I had literally 9 months to figure out and understand what the birth was going to be like, okay? I mean, you got to talk to people, and you got the class you can take and all this stuff. I mean, I was prepared for that, but now what? Well, you get all prepared and excited about getting married, and then now you're married. I said, now what do you do? It's not honeymoon all the time. It's real life, two people who see the world very differently, even though you may see things very similarly in some ways. All right? So let's just keep that in mind. So when you ask, like, what are the rights? I don't think that's what we need to be thinking about. You may want to talk about the Torah laws that are concerning women and the Torah laws that are concerning men. And so that's something to think about. And there's not necessarily a whole lot of those that apply right now without a temple. So it's not... Almost everything in Torah that applies to one applies to both at this point, except for those that would be temple related. Really, everything that's not temple related that apply to a man apply to a woman and vice versa for the most part. Okay? Hopefully that answers the question. And please forgive me my joke saying you can remain silent. That was a joke. All right. It was too easy. Okay. All right. Next question.
Okay, from Beyond Ready. It says, does it break Torah to brew coffee on Shabbat?
Ah, the fun questions. And the reason I say that is because everybody wants to figure out, this is almost like the question about the rights. Where is the line? Really, isn't that what everybody always asks? Essentially, it's not like this person's trying to get away with anything. I don't want to, put motive to it. But essentially, we're trying to figure out where the line is, which is good. You should be trying to figure out where the lines are because you don't want to trespass and go over the line. Okay? And opinions will vary on these kind of things. Well, can you make coffee on Shabbat? Can you make toast on Shabbat? These are like the questions that people ask. All right. So, by the way, if the Ruach is handling everything, why are people asking these questions? Okay, because that's not the way the Ruach works, right? And this is the kind of stuff that we need, Deuteronomy 17, 18, and Ephesians chapter 4 type of people. Because you want to know, and you want somebody to make that decision. Here's the first question I would have for you before answering the question, which, by the way, I'm just stalling. Well, some of you were thinking that anyway. The first question I want to ask you, though, is how ready and willing are you to act upon the answer? Are you willing and are you ready to submit to the answer? Because some of you will like it if I say you can, and some of you won't. And some of you will like it if I said you can't, and some of you won't. So I get an equal opportunity to piss off half of you, which is perfectly okay by me. Because I'm red and I don't care. Okay. All right? But I say I don't care, meaning I'm going to do what has to get done and not care about whether or not you like it. So it's not that I don't care, but you understand what I'm saying? All right? Some of you blues understand what I'm talking about because you'll want to make a decision and you want to go ahead and step up, but you actually do care about the response you're going to get. Because you either don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or you don't want to have the backlash that might be coming. Okay, but I can tell you if you're coming from a purely red point of view, you're going to do what needs to get done and it doesn't matter the rest. You're just going to do it because it needs to get done. Okay? All right. So, when we have made these decisions, and they have come up in the past, and I think this is a good time to talk about it with the feasts even. One of the things that we had to discuss was when Yahweh gave these instructions, they were very specific to things that were happening at the time. Not necessarily, I'm not saying Yahweh didn't know someday we would have electricity and microwaves and, stoves, ovens, and the rest of this wonderful technology. Because back then you had to make a fire. And you had to boil the water in a pot to make, to cook a lot of the foods were done in stews and soups and that kind of thing. Or you had to cook the animal over a spit. And this took hours and things. Or you had to also kill the animal. You had to skin the animal. Or you had to pluck the feathers or whatever you had to do. So this wasn't like a simple thing to make food the way we do it today. So let's start off with recognizing that things are different on some level. All right. But on every interest that we're trying to figure out what do we do here? We have to always be careful that we're not spinning anything. We don't want to spin ourselves into non-Torah observance. Okay? So I'm interested in this issue. I'm studying it out. I want an answer. But I got to be real careful that it's not, I have to say the word colored by my emotion. Because we talked earlier about you don't want to deal with that, right? But we can have things filtered through your emotions. I want my coffee. I need to find out that it's okay. All right? Especially you 5-cup-a-day addicts. I can't function without my coffee. 30% of my plasma is coffee. I don't get it because I don't drink a whole lot of coffee. I don't drink any coffees, really, so I don't know why. I don't get the whole addiction thing, but, I just never was a coffee drinker, okay? Mostly I think it is, okay, actually I think it's logical now that I'm thinking about it. You know why I'm not a coffee drinker? Because I'm red. Not the reason you think, though. Because it took too much effort to try to figure out how to make it right. Okay, I took the cup, I poured in the coffee. I poured in some of the creamer, I put in some of the sugar, I tasted it, no good. Try again. Put the coffee in the cup. Put in a different amount of milk, put in a different amount of sugar. No, no good. It's not enough coffee, it's not enough sugar, it's not enough creamer, it's not... I can't figure this silly thing out. Well, why don't you just drink black coffee? What? I'm trying to put all that creamer and sugar in there because I can't drink the black coffee. So I just gave up too much effort. I mean, I was already like done and moved on to 6 other projects by the time I could figure out a coffee. You know. I mean, I'll try it every now and then. If I get it right the first time, I drink it. If I don't, I just give up and move on. I got too many other things to do. I guess eventually you figure out how much you like, but I haven't gotten there. I think once I magically got it just right. It was perfect, but I don't remember what I did. So I give up. Okay. So when we're looking at these things, we have to say, okay, what is different now? We got a lot of things that are different now. Like we're told not to work on Shabbat. That's good. Neither your manservant or maidservant. That's good. What about turning on electricity, Rabbi? People are working. Well, now we got to figure out, are they your manservant or maidservant? We got to figure out some other things. The way I defined it was understanding what we call active commerce versus passive commerce. Rabbi, none of that stuff's in the Bible. I know. It'd be great if it was, though, so we'd have the answers we're looking for. That's why you should be glad you're not in my position. Because the leadership had to sit down and figure out, how do we answer these very challenging questions? Do we do like the Karaite Jews and sit in our house with no heat and no electricity on Shabbat, whether it's summer or winter, because we're not going to do anything that might be creating a spark or having somebody work or whatever? So we're just going to sit there. By the way, all these people watching right now live stream who watch on every Shabbat, they would have no access if they didn't have their internet on Shabbat. Oh, but somebody's working at the internet company on Shabbat. And your electricity is running so you can have internet on Shabbat. Or if you're doing it on your phone like a lot of people do, you have phone service that you're paying for on Shabbat. I know this is a long-winded way of answering the question, but I think it's important. Are we good so far? Okay. So let's understand some of those issues. I know we're trying to eventually figure out whether or not you can have coffee. We'll get there. I told you, I'm stalling. Okay. So we came to an insight. Okay, the insight being that there's a difference between active commerce and passive commerce. Let's deal with that first. What are you talking about, Rabbi? All right, so active commerce is that you have something, I walk over to you, you give it to me, and I pay for it. Okay? So I go to a restaurant, I order food, they bring me the food, and I pay for it. It's active commerce. If I'm sitting in a restaurant, everybody in the restaurant knows that sometime in the few minutes, I'm going to finish my meal and pay for it that day, that time. So if I was in a restaurant on Shabbat, it's clear to everyone that I'm going to be doing active commerce. So active commerce is absolutely not allowable on Shabbat. Okay? Now, you live in a house. You live in an apartment. You live in something that you're paying for on a monthly basis. Did you walk in on Saturday and pay for that day's rent? No? You don't go in on Monday and Tuesday and each day and pay for your rent? No? Okay. But you pay for the month. So that means that anybody seeing you in your house or your apartment on Saturday is not thinking that you went that day and did active commerce. We agree? Because you paid for the whole month. And so you're there. It's like if you go to a hotel. Look, people stayed in the inn, they stayed in different places like that in scriptural times. And you would stay there for a period of time. Maybe like Sukkot, you would stay for Sukkot. And so you would pay at the end or at the beginning, a lot of the times, for your stay. You would arrange and agree to an amount, and then you would stay. And it would include room or room and board or whatever it was. You might get some food. It may just be shelter. And so, again, it's passive commerce. So like if you're at the hotel lobby, walking out to come here, on Saturday, and so you're leaving the hotel, nobody in the hotel is thinking necessarily that you're doing business that day. They just know you're staying there. You could be staying there for another 3 or 4 days. You could be leaving after Sunday. They don't know. They know that you're likely, like everybody else, to pay when you leave. So they just see you coming and going through the hotel, like a lot of people do. They have no idea what you're doing, nor would they necessarily assume you're doing business. We good so far? All right? Same thing if said, well, what about the breakfast they provide? That was included in the hotel as part of your, also the soap and the shampoo and the water and electricity and everything else, the bed and the linen and changing services and everything else that was part of the deal. You were not paying for them on that day. You're paying for them as a package, a whole deal. All right? Because this came up as a good question when we did Sukkot at a property where they provided all our meals. But Rabbi, we don't want to pay for meals on Shabbat. You're not. You're paying for meals for the whole week. It's passive commerce. Just like going and getting the free breakfast in the hotel. Understand, this is what we're talking about. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do these things. You could do things as conservatively as you'd like. I'm just kind of giving you the minimum, that at least the basic understanding that we have put forth at MTOI. All right? Next piece of this. Manservant, maidservant. Well, what about the people at the hotel that are doing the food and everything? Do they work for you? No, they work for the hotel. Manservant, maidservant means that you are primarily responsible for them. Those people generally lived on your property, and you actually had control over what they did. You could make them not work. Can you make the person at the hotel not work? At the electricity place not work? At the internet place not work? No. So they're not your manservant or maidservant. So this is important, and it will free you from a lot of ridiculousness, okay? This is really critical. All right, so these people, if you look at the verse, it says, neither you, so you're not working, your manservant or maidservant, you don't have one. Most of us don't, okay? Now, if you own a business, your employees should not be working because you are responsible for them and their income. You get to decide whether or not they work. You have a business, it needs to be closed. Well, you know, but I have a partner, and they, don't play that game. You own that business in some sort of a real authoritative way? I don't care if it's only half yours. I'm not talking about like I'm an investor in a major corporation like Apple or something, of like 0.01% of the business. I have no say. But if you're actually a partner and you have say, you need to not be doing a business and having people work on Shabbat. And if that doesn't work for you, sell out your part to the other guy, go do something else. Let him buy you out or her buy you out. So now we've dealt with active commerce, passive commerce, and manservant and maidservant. So now we're going to deal with cooking. Oh, we're finally there. No, I'm still stalling. Okay, so let's actually deal with something before the cooking. Sparking the fire. All right? Jews won't drive a car because the combustion engine is sparking a fire, and that's kindling a fire. And we're told not to kindle a fire on Shabbat. That verse in that section is talking about a work fire. Because remember, this is in a section where they're talking about building the tabernacle. And there needed to be a lot of fires to melt all of the different things, to coat things with the gold or to coat things with the brass or whatever they were making. They needed fires to do this. Okay, so they needed work fires. Now they talk about fires that are for cooking also. They talk about fires that, and they don't really talk about, you need to know that they had fires to keep them warm at night. Because the pillar of fire would have burned them all to death, those that were close to it. If it could keep a few square miles worth of people, figure out how much room it takes to put 3 million people. That's a lot of space. So I know that they were in the desert. Does it get cold at night in the desert sometimes, especially in the winter? You bet. Do you think they had fires to keep them warm? Absolutely. So we're talking about, he says, I don't want you doing work, so I don't want you even kindling a work fire to be tempted to do work. But they had warmth. And he says, boil what you boil, cook what you cook. Okay, now we're really getting to it. We've covered all the other aspects, now we're going to get here. So, boil what you boil, cook what you cook. So cooking, remember we talked about this at the very beginning. The process of cooking back then, my wife stayed in the Ukraine for a while helping teach people English. She was part of an outreach from the college she was going to. And they hired somebody to cook their food in the little apartment house that they were living in for that period of time. And those people would, after breakfast was done, start making lunch because it took that long. Because if you wanted chicken for lunch, they were actually plucking the chicken and preparing. They didn't just go get one out of the refrigerator that was already prepared and just go ahead and stick it on the oven. So it literally took hours to prepare when you're preparing everything from scratch. So imagine what they did when they didn't have any refrigerators, stoves, or any of that stuff. You had a fire and a way to hang a pot from the fire or to hold a skillet over to where, but you only had a fire. Okay, so cooking was an involved process. Okay, we're going to skip over to what is Shabbat all about? Set apart time. Now be careful, don't spin here. But it's set apart time. So what we're trying to protect here is the time. Yahweh knew what kind of time it would take to cook. And so he says, don't cook. And when it says boil, it's talking about the difference in cooking, like as in meat and stuff, as opposed to making soups and stews and things. All right? It wasn't that they were making coffee. Nowhere does it show Israel sitting around having a cup of coffee. Okay? And along the journey into the land, there were no Starbucks. I'm pretty sure. Okay? They may have worshipped that symbol on the outside of Starbucks, but there wasn't any Starbucks. Okay, some of those nations might have, who knows? All right, now, and so let's understand what is he talking about, because you have to think about what were they actually doing then. They were taking something you could not eat in its current condition and cooking it so it can be made edible, so you could eat it. All right? That which didn't need to be cooked to eat, they would eat. All right, so the ruling that we gave from the MTOI leadership, which means essentially from me, after we had this long meeting and discussion, and this is again with leadership in the vertical, the higher up the vertical, the more you have a burden of responsibility to make decisions. But out of an abundance of counsel, I made a decision. By the way, my second responsibility after making the decision, you're still waiting for the decision, aren't you? Okay, my second responsibility, it'll be in the Millennium Kingdom Part 4. Now, the second responsibility for the decision maker, okay, is to try to bring consensus with those who gave their input so that everybody's in agreement. It's not like, yeah, I heard everybody, but this is what we're going to do, and I don't care what you had to say. Then it's my job to explain why the decision was made. Why did you pick that decision? And then discuss it some more until everybody understands and agrees with the decision as making sense for whatever the reasoning was. So it's not just the leadership, just as for all of you, and when you're, especially the head of the house, you're the man of the house, whatever, don't just make decisions. Part of the choice now, part of the responsibility is to convince those that are being affected by your decision the reasoning behind it and why it's the right decision, at least for that circumstance at that time. If you ever remember listening to teaching, Making the Calendar Decision, that's exactly what that teaching was about, explaining how I made the calendar decision. And it was after a leadership meeting, and we sat around and talked about it, and I explained that whole thing in that teaching. Okay, now, so when you're thinking about what you can do on Shabbat, so let's first understand you shouldn't be eating anything that needs cooking to be edible. All right? Okay? So if you have to cook it in order to eat it, you shouldn't be doing anything to it. Now, so for example, you take a piece of bread, you could eat that. Heating it up so it's warm, and then we call that toast, that is not cooking. Okay? You certainly could have ate the bread. You like it to be a little bit warmer. Takes a few seconds. Does not affect the fact that you're protecting time. Okay? Yahweh's time is what's the whole point. So can you have toast? I don't have a problem with that. Okay? Now we go to something like tea. like an herbal tea or whatever you want to make tea or coffee. Can you have the tea or the coffee without cooking it? Well, it says boil what you boil. Well, what if I just use really hot water so it didn't quite boil? See, now we're starting to try to figure out those thin lines. My personal opinion is that the way we do coffee, the way we do tea, isn't breaking anything. It's not cooking the way you would normally think, because we're not talking about cooking like a soup and cooking like a stew. And you have to sit there and put you have to cut them up, and you have to prepare it. It's a whole different deal. Okay? You have a device that can make the temperature of the water hot enough in a few seconds, and then you can pour that into your cup and make a coffee and drink it. Is that any different than if I took a iced tea powder and put it in a cup, put the water in and stirred it up? Not really. The stove is just going to heat the water up so it's hotter. So I don't have a problem with that, okay? So let's just keep that as simple as it gets. That was a long-winded way to say, I don't have a problem with you having a cup of coffee on Shabbat. But I answered like 75 other questions along the way, all right? Let's try, look, you know what? You don't need to heat up anything. You can make a sandwich on Shabbat. Okay, but some of you make a sandwich, that's like an hour, because you put this on it and that on it, and cut this over and slice that up. And let's make it simple, please. Take something pre-sliced, pre-made, whatever's ready. Prepare it the day before if you want to have a bunch of sliced up things. Just open the container, put it on your bread and eat it, okay? Have a salad, but don't go through the elaborate process of making one on Shabbat. Make it the night before sundown. Make it the day before on Friday. So all you do is open the bowl of salad, put some on your plate, put some dressing on it if that's what you want to eat it. Just make it simple. Okay, I eat eggs almost every Saturday because my wife hard boils them on Friday. And so I eat one that's already been cooked. Because you can't eat an egg. Well, I guess you can have a raw egg and just drink it like some people do in a shake. But generally, you don't eat an egg raw. So we cook them, but we don't do it on Saturday. We boil about a half a dozen of them, or as many as we think we're going to want to eat on Friday, and then we have them ready for Saturday morning just to, crack them open, take the shell off, and eat them. Okay? Again, I'm not going to turn them into an elaborate, egg salad. I'm just going to have an egg. Okay? Let's minimize the time component. We're trying to protect his time. All right? Well, you don't understand, Rabbi. I could take a frozen steak and have that thing raw, rare and ready to go in only a couple of minutes. No. I told you, let's not spin this. Okay? And don't think I made a decision about coffee because I drink it. I don't. That's why I started off with that. So I wasn't benefiting me. Okay? Any questions about what I just said? I said a whole lot of stuff. Was there any hands for that? Okay. Do I get an applause for that? Was it appreciated? After all, it only cost us 45 minutes of this whole Torah study. Next question. Over here, Chris.
Will Yeshua blow the shofar when he comes back?
Will Yeshua blow the shofar? You mean the one that announces he's coming back?
Yes.
You're not going to tempt me into Revelation or something like that. I see what you're trying to do.
Not my question. It was Rick's question.
Usually Rick gets those through the live stream while he's sitting there. He types them in. That's the funniest thing. I'm sitting here looking at him and I hear a live stream question from him. Look, it doesn't say, I'm sure he'll blow a shofar throughout his life while he's here, but it doesn't say how that shofar is going to get sounded, who's going to do it, and how that all works out. Okay? It doesn't tell us. Okay. And Rick, that's 4 demerits for trying to pull that one. You used that poor young innocent boy to do that. Shame on you. I wonder what I'm going to get next because I got Norma. Oh, you guys were discussing it after the mikvah? I see. Okay. Okay, Norma.
Good night. Chapter 4. Oh, I'm sorry. 28.
Chapter 4. Oh, by the way, did you enjoy my Millennium and Kingdom Part 4? That was what we heard for the last 45 minutes. No, I'm kidding. By the way, if anybody thinks they want that teaching, there's nobody wants it more than she does, just so you know.
I'm still waiting for the sound to come in the CD.
Oh,
I play every night, but
it doesn't play?
it doesn't play.
Blame Manny.
Okay.
He might have mixed it wrong. Okay, so if you
Unintentionally.
don't understand, as a joke, Manny made me a CD and the label on it says Millennium and Kingdom Part 4. So I gave it to Norma. There's nothing on it.
Do you want to say what I gave you for?
Yeah, she gave me a check for $4 million. That in the signature part says, not signed. It was a fair exchange. A useless check for a useless CD.
Let's
And here's
see.
the funny part. I was planning to give her the CD, and she was planning to give me the check before we did it.
Yep.
Because as soon as I handed her the CD, she goes, by the way, I've got something for you. Walks over to her car, pulls out the envelope, and hands it to me. We were both prepared. All right, I'm ready. Bring it on.
Okay, this is chapter 28. It's talking about an
What applies to us starts after verse 15. Okay? Everything before verse 15 doesn't apply to us. All right?
Okay, and also I'm still thinking about this part where it says in the same chapter 28, verse 11,
Okay?
and then 18, because it's talking about, and Yahweh shall make you to have plenty of what is good in the fruit of your body. Is that the descendants? It's talking about the descendants in the chapter 11 and 18.
Yeah. What they're talking about there is that everything that reproduces is not going to have any problems. Okay? You're not going to have any barren people. Your animals are going to reproduce without any issues. Your plants and your crops are going to grow to abundance. But that includes your body. Because remember, there were, and still are today, a lot of people with fertility issues. We see a lot of actually prime and important people in Scripture that are barren and having fertility issues. And he's saying that when you come into the land and you're obedient to the covenant, you will have none of those problems.
So it's about fertility. It's not about the descendants that they are going to be cursed.
No, because when we get to verse 18, he's going to say, cursed is the fruit of your body. And it's the opposite of verse 11. Yeah. Okay? So you're going to have problems in birth. You're going to maybe have issues with what, you give birth to. And we do have that today. We have a lot of people with birth issues, birth defects, challenges in those ways, handicaps. We're suffering through all of that stuff. So it does have to do with your descendants from that point of view. Yes, this curse, by the way, continues until the restoration of Ezekiel 37, Jeremiah 31, and those kind of things, when everybody comes back together.
But if that is the case, why it says in other part of the scriptures that the son will not pay for the sin of the father or the unrighteousness of the father, and vice versa?
In terms of individual judgment. We're also told that judgment, as far as if you do this, okay, you'll be cursed onto this third and fourth generation, or second and how many generations out. In other words, the cause and effect type of situation. In other words, the consequence of what you did is going to have generational consequences. Now, you give birth to a child. That child has some sort of handicap. That child is neither blessed nor cursed just because they're whatever they are. What matters now is their choices. Now, they may be handicapped to the point where they actually can't make the choices. They will then, in my opinion, have that opportunity, likely in the millennium, where they'll be given a healing, where they'll have a sound mind and ability to function so that they can make the choices. Because everybody has to make the choices. So there's nothing to worry about there. But I'm saying is, the Ezekiel 18 and the other places where it talks about the Father and the Son and who is, each one being responsible for themselves, we're talking about in terms of your individual choices. Okay? That's what we're talking about. So that we're talking about covenanting versus not covenanting, sin versus righteousness. Did everybody get that? Is that good? All right. Next question. Okay, on this side, Christine.
So, can we go to the New Testament? No, he needs his candy.
All right, sorry about that. I needed to get a lozenge just over my throat here while we're going. You want to go to the New Testament?
New Testament,
Where's that?
the Brit.
Oh, is that on the right side of the book? Okay.
So I've heard you talk about this parable before, but the parable of the new patch on a tear and then the new wineskins versus the new wineskins being filled up.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share some perspective on that? I know you've taught about it before, but for whatever reason, it didn't sink in.
Okay, perspective in what way?
What's it mean?
What's it mean? Okay. Anybody know where that verse is so I can pull it out and read the context? You asked the question. Tell me where it is.
It's Matthew 9, verses 16 and 17.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now, as he's talking here, and we see starting in the beginning of chapter 9 that we're going to have a paralytic that's healed. We're going to have them struggle with the idea that he has the ability to, quote unquote, forgive sins. Okay? All right, because he says, which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven, or to say, arise and walk? That's in verse 5. Okay, he goes up to Matthew, the tax collector, which they're not understanding why he would pick a tax collector, and says, follow me. Okay, so they're asking, well, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? So they're struggling with what? A new thought in an old head. Okay? And they're not understanding that you really do need to be a new creature to understand a new thought. You have to literally, that's what the whole rebirth in the water is all about. Okay, that's what the baptism. So then he gets to chapter 9, verse 16. He says, no one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch pulls away from the garment, and the tear is made worse. He says, and neither do you put new wine into an old wineskin, or else the wineskins burst, and the wine is spilled, and the wineskins are ruined. But they put new wine into fresh wineskins, and both are preserved. Prior to this discussion, he was dealing with people having a real hard time wrapping their brain around something. Can we see that? And so he's trying to give you an example. He says, you can't just put a patch or put new stuff in an old, you're gonna have to be reborn, let's call it that way. You have to start from scratch. Reborn, don't think of it reborn from the way you were taught in Christianity. Reborn means that you are literally going to be starting like a newborn to relearn everything. Because what happens when you're first born? You've seen little babies. They're just looking at everything, and they're moving around looking, and they don't understand. They don't even know what their hand is all about. They see this thing, what is that? I have control over that, but their foot, they don't know what's going on. They have to learn everything. And so here, you who have entrenched thinking, ingrained thinking, you've been, just locked in thinking, are going to try to process new thoughts. Anybody struggle with that? Okay? And so you think, oh, well, I can just kind of put a patch on it. I can kind of figure this out a little bit and try to walk in the old way I'm walking, but walk with some of the new ways I'm walking, and basically it doesn't work. It's going to tear and only make it worse. Okay? In other words, trying to, do a compromised approach. You see this in a lot of the congregations. You see, I'm talking about the Messianic ones. When we talk about the Messa-Baptist or the Messa-Costal or the Messa whatever, they're hybrid mixes of Christianity and Torah observant covenanted ideas. And it only really does make it worse. Because now they, once again, are in a worse place than when they were in Christianity. Because in Christianity, you thought you were in the right place only to find you in the wrong place. So now even more so you think you're in the right place, you're still in the wrong place. Because that mix is still going to kill you. So does that answer the question? Okay, you're welcome. All right, next question. Where? Okay, Janet. I should just know the same people who ask and just go in order and rotate them.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
I was looking at, Bereshit, what we did this last parsha.
Wow, from the New Testament all the way back to the beginning.
Yes, chapter 6, right? Verse 5, when it says, "And Yahweh saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually."
Amen?
But then it says, "But Noah found favor in the eyes of Yahweh." So that doesn't mean that Noah didn't have the evil inclination, but that he repented and continued, like teshuvah, and went into the right path.
Well, no, I mean, it doesn't tell us that. What it does tell us that he might have been a tzaddik, because it says that Noah was a righteous man. He was a tzaddik. So, from a Jewish perspective, they would believe that he was someone who did not have the Yetzer Hara, he didn't have the evil inclination. It doesn't tell us that. So he was either righteous because he was passing the Deuteronomy 8:2 test. I know Deuteronomy didn't come out yet, but that test, I believe, always existed, where Yahweh was always testing to see whether it was in your heart to keep his commandments or not. So either he was righteous and had already overcome the evil inclination, or he was righteous because he would continually repent of it and then get back on the right path.
So I guess my question is it possible for a normal, regular human being, like in my case, me, to overcome the evil inclination? That's
Well,
only
Job
for-
did. He was a righteous man. I mean, we can get there. Okay? And all of you are getting there when each of those little evil inclination things get dealt with and removed, and now you have less of them. Let me ask you, how many of you now have less than you had last year, or 10 years, or 15 years ago? See? Just keep removing them, one by one. As many as you can get done, just keep moving forward and keep removing them. Pray, repent, right? Own it, fix it, go on to the next one. Right?
Great. I appreciate that answer a lot. It really encourages me. I have another question, and it's not related to Torah, although it's kind of related to, I don't even know how to bring it up, but I remember, and I'll just give you an example. I remember when Olivia and I were looking for houses, we went into one house, and I went all the way to the basement, and I had this terrible feeling. It was almost like a presence, like something there that didn't feel right. But it's not the first time I've felt that. So I guess my question is, what are your thoughts about, like, like I don't know if you call it a sixth sense or just a gut feeling, how do we understand that? Should we pay attention to that? Can you elaborate a little bit on that? I don't know if it's spiritual or not. Thank you.
I have a sixth sense also. I see foolish people. It is after 10 o'clock, Okay, that was my tame version of what I was normally saying. Okay. All right, first let me go back to the tzaddik thing just for a second. All have fallen short. That includes Noah and everybody else. So he is looked at as a righteous man. He didn't live a perfect life. But he certainly had his Yetzer Hara temptations under a great amount of control, especially compared to those with thoughts of wickedness continuously. Okay? So when we're referring to a tzaddik, we're not saying that the person's perfect. Because none have been here that's perfect except one. Okay, we know that. Okay, now, as far as the sixth sense, look, I know I don't talk about it in this way much, but there is a spirit realm. There is. I think we give it way too much, credit for way too many things that really you don't need to be having a spirit realm to cause you to do. You can do it quite nicely on your own, thank you. Your desires and lusts and decisions that go because of those things are quite capable of getting you in all the trouble you get in more than needing to point the finger at a spirit realm. But there is one, and we're told about it. And certainly, you could at times have a sense of it if you go into a place and you just feel like, I'm not supposed to be here. And by the way, that doesn't mean that it's because it was evil stuff there. It could be just Yahweh giving you a thought that this is not the place for you. Because maybe there's stuff there that you don't need to be involved in, but you may not feel it, but he's helping you feel something. And so call it a sixth sense, call it an intuition, whatever you want to call it. But certainly if you feel that, you shouldn't be there. Okay? This is, this is part of why I don't understand how people, and this does happen, it occasionally works, I don't know how people can internet date and then want to get married, they never met each other. How do you know you're going to feel when you're actually in their presence? Okay? Did you ever get somebody that you thought was whatever, then when you actually got to meet them and were in their presence, you got a different sort of feeling? That they either made you more comfortable or more uneasy? But you really wouldn't know that till you actually were with them? Okay? So this is one of those things. Okay. I think with me, actually, there are people, I don't know how many people would agree, but I think a lot of people, when they finally do get to meet me, and we get to sit down and everything, in my presence, they actually feel less afraid, less concerned, less nervous. They get a different feeling when they actually sit with me as opposed to seeing me just on the screen and, you know what I'm saying? Okay? Did that answer your question? All right, good. Who's next?
Live stream.
Live stream?
Okay, from Santi Lee. So Yeshua said, be baptized by the water and the Spirit in John 3:5. Does it mean asking the Holy Spirit to dwell in us, to empower us to understand and keep commandments wholeheartedly?
Okay, so John 3:5, I expressed the answer to this. This is where he's talking to Nicodemus. And we do have a teaching called, I can always get the name wrong. Is it Picking on Nicodemus or something? Or something like that. What's it called? Picking on Nicodemus? Okay. So you might want to listen to that. But also you want to listen to the baptism of fire teaching, which explains baptism of water, baptism of fire, and baptism of spirit. Okay, so that will get into that. Santi, it's good to hear from you. We miss you. I know you were here last year. But let's just go over this a little bit. It says, so Nicodemus is being told about being born again in verse 3. Yeshua says, truly, truly I say to you, unless one is born again from above, born from above, he is unable to see the reign of Elohim. Unless he's, and by the way, the word see has to do with knowing and perceiving the reign. So unless you are birthed from above. Now remember, we're talking about something that's much more, I hate to say Kabbalistic, but the idea of the above versus the below. The flesh versus the spirit. The earthly versus the heavenly. He says, you need to have back to the wineskin example, you need to have a born from above experience where now you're able to receive from above, then you're not going to see or perceive or know and understand the kingdom. Because that's a new wine going into an old wineskin. If you are still born from below, if you're still flesh, you're still earthy, how are you going to put a heavenly or the spiritual or from the stuff from above in? So that's where you're having this born again experience. Not born again as what Christianity tells you. But now you're being born as if you're starting from scratch. And this time, though, because he's touched you with the open eyes, open ears, open heart, you can receive and perceive the above. Okay? He says, unless one is born from above, in other words, the above has to give a new birth to you. When your eyes were opened, what happens when you come out of the womb? Your eyes open. Hopefully your ears open. And you're now ready to receive all of the wonders of outside the womb. So you have to be born from above. If you're not, you are unable to know or perceive or see the kingdom. So it's not just see the kingdom, meaning they won't get there. Although that also has a certain amount of truth to it as well. But the actual Greek here, etc., has more to do with they are unable, because here he is, Nicodemus is asking questions, he's trying to say, look, you're asking me questions, but unless your mind has been renewed and reborn from above, you're not going to understand or be able to perceive what I'm explaining to you. And Nicodemus proves this in the next verse. He says, well, how is a man able to be born when he's old? Is he able to enter into his mother's womb a second time and be born? So he understood he was talking about that type of a innocence of a new beginning, a fresh, clean start. And Yeshua said, truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he is unable to enter into the kingdom. So now he's saying, unless you are born of water. So what's water? We're born in water, aren't we? Okay? We develop and grow in the womb in water. You have to be born of water. Water we look at now as a person outside the womb as going into the baptismal, where you go into the water and you bury the old, and you come out new. So now you're a new garment or you're a new wineskin. He says you got to be of water and of spirit. Okay, what is spirit? He just said you have to be born from above. How is that done? By the Spirit. The Father decides he's going to open your eyes. So he has the Ruach open your eyes. He has the Ruach open your ears. He has the Ruach open your heart. Clear away the delusion. That should be simple enough. Okay? He says, that which has been born of the flesh is flesh, but that which has been born of the Spirit is spirit. Do not marvel that I said to you, you have to be born from above. See, now he's trying to get these things connected. Now again, as we've been teaching over the last several months, a lot more about the differences as a comparison, the comparing of the above versus the below, which is the same thing as comparing the spirit versus the flesh, same thing as the heavenly versus the earthly. 3 different ways of saying the same thing. Okay? So it says the Spirit breathes where it wishes, and you hear it in the sound of it, but do not know where it comes from, where it goes. So is everyone who's born of the Spirit. So then, how is it possible for this to take place? And then Yeshua says, are you the teacher of Israel and you don't know this? And by the way, in that little picking on Nicodemus thing, I quote the verse out of the Old Testament that talks about this exact thing that Nicodemus should have known. Because Yeshua can't pick on him unless we should be able to figure out why Nicodemus should have known this. All right? So go back and listen to that teaching for that. I don't remember the verse off the top of my head at this point. Okay? But then he says, truly, truly, I say to you, we speak what we know and witness what we have seen, and you do not receive our witness. Okay, if you do not believe me when I talk to you about earthly matters, how are you going to believe when I speak to you about heavenly matters? You see, now he's doing the same reference. Because unless you're born from above, you can't understand heavenly or spiritual. Those 3 things go together. But you're fleshly and earthly, and so how are you going to understand these things when I talk to you? If you can't understand the earthly, and that's what you are, how are you going to understand the heavenly, the spiritual? Okay, does this make any sense? All right. Where's the mic? All right, where's the mic now? We'll go to the next question. Live stream still, okay?
Okay, from Sean and Aaron, and Sarah Richard says, why don't the Jews accept the Maccabee writings in their canon, but yet they celebrate the victory talked about in the writings?
I skipped that meeting and I wasn't there when they talked about it. I don't have any idea why they did that. I don't know. I have no idea why they did what they did. Okay? I can't explain to you how we ended up with the 66 books we have now. Do you know how many books there were that at one point were in a canon and they're not in the canon? There's over 100 of them. But Yahweh guided us to have this eventually. Okay? Next question.
From Beyond Ready says, is the term kingdom of God referring to the millennial reign, or is it the Olam Haba?
The term, it's actually more than that. It's not either or. It's all that, and it also is at hand now. It is all the coming together of the saints, so to speak. It's a whole process that leads eventually to the forever, what we call forever kingdom. Certainly the millennium is part of it because Yeshua will literally be king on the throne. And certainly he will also be, as we call it, the kingdom in Revelation 21 and 22 as it finishes. And so, but he also says the kingdom of Elohim is at hand. In other words, it's being birthed, it's being begun. Okay? So it's a whole lot more than that. What else you got?
From Kaisha, says, does it break Torah to profit from the pagan celebrations? Example, Christmas, if your niche of business happens to benefit from such, like outside catering, provided you specify that you only deal in kosher.
Well, you do want to make sure that those Christmas parties only have kosher food. That's very important. We only cater those only kosher food for your Christmas party. Look, I personally, because I can't point to a scripture for all of this, but I personally would not be wanting to do anything that's actively participating in any of that stuff. Okay, if you're going to say that you own like an electronics store and you benefit from Christmas because a lot of your stuff sells more at that time, that's one thing. But if somehow actively connected, like I'm not going to be selling in my store, if I have like a food type store, chocolate bunnies and chocolate Santa Clauses and benefit from selling anything that points to, celebrates, or is involved in those things. Right? I'm not doing your Christmas party. Okay? I was a DJ once upon a time, used to do parties. Okay? I wouldn't do your Christmas party. I'll do your wedding. I would do people's, other birthday parties, but I wasn't doing those kind of celebrations. I would try to stay far away from any involvement in them. Okay? Anything else? All right, go ahead. Mr. Bishop.
Yeah, Bishop.
Not yet, I haven't promoted you.
That's another inside joke. I almost feel a little bit like Rocky tonight. That there's so much of this.
See that, Rocky? You're contagious.
Yeah, but you have the.
He said good.
You have the patent on this this revelation, but I have that feeling tonight too that a lot of what's being said sort of carries a theme that we're talking about. Earlier we were talking about color and getting rid of color and seeing each other as one in unity. And there's a lot that we've talked about in Deuteronomy and hashed it again and clarified a lot of things about becoming coveted, being coveted, and covenanted. And so when Christina got up and asked if we could go to the New Testament, the New Covenant, and brought up the verse about the wineskin and the patch, I just knew that I had to get some clarification, but maybe some commentary on. It seems to me that there is in Romans 11 something that Paul is talking about when he's referring to the vine and being grafted in. And then in verse 25, this has been a verse that I had to defend in my own thought. I'm going to say well before I began this path here, but in the Christianese world, the part there that talks about brothers, at least you should be. That Paul is saying, don't be ignorant of this secret, that at least you should be wise in your own estimation, that the hardening in part has come over the Israel, and that the completeness of the nation, until the completeness of the nations has come in, that line right there, the completeness of the nation has come in. I was always defending that in a different way. A lot of people wanted to let that be an example of evangelism and bringing the Jews into the church. And I said, no, it can't be that, because it doesn't fit the context of this Romans 11. It needs to be that we are coming into a covenant that is part of the Jews, and the Jews and the Gentile become one. And I see that also in the discussion we were talking about when you were saying in color, we can't have color be a discriminating thing, but we have to begin to see each other. The most important way is to look at whether or not we are pursuing the covenant or we're not pursuing the covenant. That's the important thing that I think Paul is talking about here. Until we develop this oneness and this unity, we're not preparing ourselves for the coming kingdom of Yahweh. Am I right in looking at it that way, or am I still?
No, everything you said.
base?
No, everything you said is straight on. There's some more things I would probably add to it, but everything you said is straight on. Okay, look, a lot of the points being made in Romans 11. Go listen again, maybe to the discovering your identity, teaching, because Romans 11 is talking about being grafted into the root. The natural Israelites are the root. The Jews who were alive at that point, who are the visible Israelites, are the root. Okay, the root is the Torah, is Yeshua, but the Jews are the ones who were there first. That's why he says of the Jew first and then everybody else, because they were the ones who were still visibly available. All right? Now, as far as the hardening in part has come on Israel, look, in the effort or process, when Yeshua says, I come to seek that which was lost, okay? Christianity tells you that means people that are unsaved. No. He's talking about the lost sheep, the lost tribes. I'm coming to seek that which was lost, the ones who were scattered. But they were scattered everywhere. And in the process of getting them back, of calling them back, of searching for them and bringing them back, everybody, the whomsoever wills, who are amongst those scattered Israelites or around those scattered Israelites, are getting to hear the message. And so this is a temporary blindness on some of them. So in the effort to get all of them, if it takes longer to do, we get to the fullness of the Gentiles or nations getting to hear it and make their choices. If it happened quickly, there wouldn't be any time for that to happen. So he's purposely slowing it down with some, allowing a hardening in those Israelites, in part, so that some are coming, because that's fulfilling the promise, and others are still waiting to have that little bubble pop thing go on, because it allows more time to get the rest of the nations. Does that make sense then, Ken? Okay, so it's a timing mechanism, as well as everything you said. All right? Okay, who's next? Okay, Rick?
Just a quick follow-up to his. There was a reference, I never noticed this before, back to Bereshit 48, 20. No, up above that. But anyway, it references Ephraim. Yes, the completeness of the nations. It's verse 19. So it's talking about Joseph and the blessing on Manasseh and Ephraim. And it actually uses the phrase completeness of the nations there in reference to Ephraim.
Right.
So that's what you just explained?
That is essentially the part of what I'm talking about. It's that in the scattered Ephraimites, the scattered Israelites, okay, being scattered all over the place, they will ultimately, this is all part of the plan when Abraham was told, you will be the father of many goyim, many nations. Well, goyim are not covenanted people, but you will be the father of many, because in the scattering, ultimately, we bring all of them to the opportunity to be covenanted. Okay, this is part of the the end from the beginning vision and understanding that Yahweh had. He knew and told Abraham, someday your seed will lead to a place where you will be the father of many goyim. And next, anybody else? Okay, in the back. Who's back there? Ati?
Yeah, hi, Rabbi. I just had a quick question. I came upon this verse through Facebook, and I just want to know if I did a good job at kind
Well,
of...
Rabbi Facebook is very smart.
Well, it was,
Not as smart as Rabbi Google, but
It
close.
was just a quote, a Bible verse quote, and I just wanted to know if I did a good job at kind of like reading through the context, because I know you always tell us that context matters. But it was Psalms 46, verse 5, and the quote is different from our version. The quote that I saw was, God is within her, she will not fall, God will help her at break of day. And so I'm just kind of like, that's something I would have reposted back in my Christian days. But anyways, I look at the verse and it says, Elohim is in her midst. She does not topple. Elohim does help her when morning turns. But the she isn't actually a female, correct? It's more so, based on the context, is it talking about, or I'll just ask you because I don't want to just embarrass myself in case I'm wrong. But who is the she that this passage is referring to?
Okay, did you read the psalm? Okay, so when it says, a river whose streams make glad the city of Elohim, that's your she. The city of Elohim, which is generally known as Yerushalayim. Okay? The set-apart dwelling place of the set-apart dwelling of the Most High. Elohim is in her midst. She does not topple. Elohim does help her when morning turns. Okay?
So I did a good job. I just didn't want to say that and then embarrass myself, but thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Mr. Phillip.
Yes, sir. So I had a question. It was kind of inspired by Janet's question a few minutes ago. I can't remember. I'm sure you've addressed this somewhere. I can't remember if it was a teaching, live stream, Torah study. Are we correct when one reflects on their life to think that Yahweh orchestrated everything that you've gone through in your whole life? Or are we correct, or is it correct to say that that was just the consequence of your choices or in actions and so forth?
Okay, so this puts us into one of those really sort of tough questions that people always want to ask, because they're looking for understanding of things that could be called predetermined or predestination and that kind of thing versus free will and how that all plays out. So it's not so much an orchestrating. Remember, Yahweh being outside of time is able to see the end from the beginning. So when he does whatever he does in your life is because he already knows the decisions that you will make. Okay? So first of all, he knows that you can. So I hate to use this example, but I think it's a great example, okay, in some ways. When you look at Doctor Strange at the end of the Avenger movie, and he's playing every possible scenario, okay, that could happen. If I do this, then this is what happens, and that could happen, And he played every scenario. So Yahweh already knows every scenario from every being based on everything that could happen in their lives. And if this happened, and this, would that get them to the place where, because he ultimately wants all men, if possible, to be saved. So he knows that you can make it. He also knows what kinds of trials might help you to, if you choose, to deal with your stuff and your issues. And so he's already seen you do it. So it's not like he's predestined you to. He already knows how you're going to respond because of the choice you will make out of free will, but he's seen you make it already. Did that make sense? I know that kind of was a little complex, but all right? So it's kind of like if I'm playing chess with you, okay, and I know your style of play. So I know if I do this and put pressure on that piece there, that you're probably going to do this and respond. And then I have to decide, is that going to get you in where I want to get you? because I know the choices you will make. And if my desire is for good for you, now we're going back to not the chess game, okay, then I will do certain things knowing the type of choice you will make because it's going to get you to the place that's better and better and better. But yet you are choosing. But I know the choices you will make. Why? Because I'm able to play that through in my ability to see the future as the same as the past, the same as the present, so I can see that all play out. Does that kind of work? Does that make sense for people? So you still have free will. But Yahweh just understands and knows exactly the choices you will make. He was not surprised when he did what he did to Moses, and Moses chose to hear him, follow what he wanted to do, and go to Pharaoh, etc., etc. All right? And he knew he would kind of hem and haw a little bit and said, well, I'll give you your brother to talk for you. I mean, these things are all played through. Okay? Because the whole predestined thing sort of makes none of this make any sense. If it was predestined, then what's the point? I mean, why didn't you just put us there in the first place and just, get this over with already? And if you're once saved, always saved, and it's just a matter of finding out the Messiah is here and alive and well after dying and being resurrected, why not just make sure everybody knows that and then we're done? Why are we still all here? Because we have to do the free will thing. We have to continuously choose him over everything else. Did that work for you? No? Yes? Okay, good. I mean, look, we're amoebas trying to understand a human being. It's really tough. We are. I mean, we're at we'll call it an incredible disadvantage. We're definitely at an incredible disadvantage as a human being trying to understand something that's well above and beyond our comprehension ability. But he gives us enough to understand enough to get there. Okay? But I still need you to absolutely embrace one of the most vital things in life, which is that your choices, at least according to everything I read in Scripture, is everything. And the fact that you have the freedom to choose. This is why Moses says, I lay before you life and death. Choose. He didn't say, I lay before you life and death. All those predestined choose life. The rest of you forget it. You're done. Too bad on you. Okay? So we know that the free will has to function in there somehow. But even with the free will, we have to balance out that Yahweh still knows the end from the beginning. So that's a hard thing for our brains to wrap around. Okay, next. Okay, in the back. Okay, Greg.
Hi, Rabbi. This is a question from an amoeba.
You're kind of tall for an amoeba.
When it comes to taking every thought into captivity, is there a department, let's say, like a police department in our mind, in our being? Is it, I guess first, is it a thought that takes into captivity those thoughts that are negative or dark or below? Is it like an above thought that actually surrounds that negative thought and basically locks it up? And so how does that occur? Is there an easy answer for that?
How well do you know neuroscience? No, I'm kidding. All right, so, all right, look, the process works like this, the best I can explain, all right? It all begins with, when he opened your eyes and ears, he also created a new field of awareness. You're now aware of things you were not aware of before. And part of that awareness is to recognize that, A, you actually have choice. You have choice in every moment, what to do with every thought, what to do with every experience, how to respond to every stimuli. You actually have choice. The other thing that you should work towards, which is hard because even though it's true, but we have to actually work towards it, is to recognize that you do have full ownership and authority of those choices. This goes back kind of to what Philip was asking about predestination, okay? And so, as far as the mechanism, once you recognize that you have an awareness, literally a neutral awareness, you're just aware of everything. But you respond to that awareness of everything so quickly, you don't even realize you had a choice. Because I see somebody walking over there. I'm aware of them. Then I now have a choice. Is it something I need to look at? Is it something that's important? See, now that awareness stimulates questions. Problem is that we've shortened the time so much between an awareness of something and a response to it that we've lost that gap. And that's the critical space where all of this, what you're talking about, happens. So a stimuli happens. You see a beautiful woman. You see somebody running in your direction. You see a car heading towards your car, whatever. You're aware of something. Now you got to decide what to do with it. But first you got to realize you have an option to decide what to do with it. Once you realize you have that option, you can take the thought, ooh, pretty woman. And then you can have another thought saying, because now that you're aware of pretty woman, the brain can say, now I have the choice what I do with thought, observation, pretty woman. Second thought, married man, observation, pretty woman, irrelevant. Okay? Noted and move on. I have that choice. Or, ooh, I'm going to stay over this way for a while. But first you have to have an awareness that all you're doing is observing or experiencing a stimuli. Something is happening that you're aware of. And now you have choice. This will stop every overreact, every angry outburst, every hurt feeling. If you could do this, you would never be upset again. Because really, you could choose not to be. All that beep, boop, 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 beep wouldn't have any effect on you. Because someone could push a button and all you're aware of, wow, somebody just pushed my button. I now can choose whatever I want to do with that. But because it's a triggered response, that choice, that observation, the choice of what to do with the observation has been skipped. It's on autopilot. It's an auto response. And so what do we need to do? I talked about being hyper-vigilantly aware, a hyper-vigilant awareness. So be aware of everything, but also be aware that in everything, if you slow everything down just a little bit, you can make a choice of what to do with what you observe. What that awareness has brought to you. Okay? All right? I could be talking to Greg, and we're sitting in my living room, and I could be completely immersed in that conversation and not aware of my wife coming in with her arms full of packages, forgetting that she told me she went to the store and would be coming back with a bunch of stuff. Or I could be hyper aware that I know she's coming, I'm still giving him my attention, we're talking, and that as soon as my awareness realizes over here that she's coming through, I can then go ahead and decide to say, excuse me, Greg, let me go help her first. Or I could be so zoned in here, not being aware, or choosing to just continue here because that, for whatever reason, does not stimulate an appropriate response in my brain, then she now is going to have to make a choice whether or not she's going to get offended because I didn't get up and help her. You see? Well, didn't you see me coming in? And now I have to think, yes, I guess I did. In my peripheral vision, I saw you. And I either ignored it, okay, or didn't, because we have way too much bang, 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 everything's thought, action, response, without thought, option, response. Thought, considering an option, response. And really, you could do that in every moment. Somebody thinking, no, I can't. Well, not the way we've been doing it forever. But up to this point, you didn't even know that you had this little process that you could interrupt. Interrupt the pattern of your behavior. How do you do this? I can give you an exercise to practice it. Okay? So what you can do is, first of all, try to at all times think of yourself as actually doing whatever you're doing and also watching yourself do it. It's weird. It's kind of weird, and it'll be really weird, especially at the beginning, but you kind of be almost like an out-of-body thing. I'm not talking literally, but you're kind of aware of what your reaction is to everything around you. And really practice saying, okay, am I reacting or am I choosing to act? Am I choosing a response? Am I reacting or am I choosing a response? Okay? Slow down everything. Very easy for me to say. I move at lightning speed. This is a hard thing for me. Okay? But those triggered responses, we need to interrupt. So how can you do this? So this is a visualization thing. Think of a situation that you tend to get triggered and you don't ever feel like you ever had a choice, you just react. Play that scenario out in your mind, but in your mind, when the thing happens, the thing you become aware of that triggers you, in your mind now see yourself pausing and recognizing. You remember like in the movies like with RoboCop and these other ones where options pop up on the screen? Okay, there's somebody doing a crime. Okay, do I disarm them? Do I pursue them? Do I, like, right? All those little digital options pop up on the screen. Picture for yourself that you have that moment to go, okay, what is the appropriate, I'm pausing now to ask myself, what's the appropriate response? Do I react the way I normally react? And then practice in your mind that pause. And then guess what? At some point, if you practice enough, you'll actually do it. The situation will pop up and you'll stop and you'll recognize that you can react differently or respond differently. A response different than a reaction. Did that help anybody? All right? I hope that got recorded because I've never said any of that before and I liked it. It was good. I want to go back and listen to that because that's really, I think, if we could get that, we would not fight like we fight. Most marriages would be completely fixed because we just don't pause to choose. Because we don't even realize we have a choice because it happens so quick that all of that stuff, all of you guys are so viciously independent. I hate to break your bubble, but you are controlled. Oh, not me. Nobody controls me. All your emotional garbage does. All your triggered responses are controlling you. Because if you weren't controlled, you could choose to respond any way you want. You could laugh when the person normally would make you want to yell. You could just be quiet in a peaceful, calm state in a time when you normally be greatly agitated. You could choose anything. You could do whatever you wanted. I mean, it's just like, it should be as simple as there's food in front of you, and you've got a knife and a fork and a spoon, and you look and you choose the fork and you go to eat. Well, maybe you choose a spoon instead. Maybe you choose the knife just to show you have choice. And the person says, why are you eating that cereal with a knife? Because I can. I had a choice. I thought I'd try something different. Practice change. Drive to work a different way every day that you can. Think of all kinds. I don't care if it's longer or short. It doesn't matter. Just realize and recognize at every moment you could choose to do something differently than you always have. Free your mind, Neo. Okay? Thank you, Greg, for the question. All right. That's going to pretty much wrap it up. It's almost 11 o'clock. I hope that was good. All of a sudden, I went into my auctioneer voice or something. 500, 500, do I hear 550? Okay, never mind. All right, we need somebody to close us up in prayer. Okay, give the microphone to Kendall.
Thank you.
Wait, hold on, we're going to get a camera on you. Okay? All right, go ahead and close us in prayer.
Abba, Father, creators of the heavens and the earth, Father, we're just so very thankful for today, and we're thankful that we can meet under this tent and just go through this Midrash and just get a little bit of more information on what we need and how we need to act for you in this life, Father. We just ask that you watch over us and protect us as we leave here and head back to our places to stay until we can meet again tomorrow on Prep Day, Father. We love you, and we pray all these things in the name and authority of Yeshua, our Messiah. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Everybody make a choice to get enough sleep to be here for the last Torah reading tomorrow. All right. Lila Tov. Have a good night.